Well, this is Brixham, a fishing port on the south coast of Devon. Well, I've walked up the hill away from the harbour up to the higher Brixham, known as Cowtown, to St Mary's Church, where the main graveyard is for Brixham. Now, the higher part of the town, Cowtown, because of its agricultural connections, and the lower part where we saw the harbour is known as Fishtown or Lower Brixham. So we're up here in the higher part. A delightful little statue here with a couple of young angels with some flowers and a bowl. They're stood on a plinth, and the name on the plinth is May Day, dearly beloved child of O.H. and E.E. Edward, who fell asleep 1920. So this is why we got the image of children as angels. It's a child's grave. Well, you can see the graveyard has been left to its own devices. A mass of grass and wildflowers. You can hear the church bell tolling the hour. I love it like this, although it's hard to get to some of the memorials. It's great for the wildlife. Very clear to read on this one. Annie, the beloved wife of Frank A. Jackman, aged 55 years, 1922. And then Frank, brackets Ronald, their son, 1929. And then Frank, down the bottom there, 1954, I think. And we have some other additions along the face of the main stone. A bit of a tilt on this one, but the first part of the inscription is clear to read. I think it's been redone. In loving memory of Maria, the wife of Samuel Parnell, 1940, and then Samuel, 1949. Beneath that are two other names, and they are rather faded. They haven't been repainted. I guess there's a story behind that. We have a war grave here to F. Middleton, the second hand on the HMPMS. Now, they were minesweepers. The Newbury, 1918, aged 53. And at the foot we see a loving husband, a faithful friend, and a kind parent to the end. F. Middleton. Now, this is a good sized graveyard, originally part of the Church of St Mary's, but there's a section here leading up to the hill. Nicely carved angel, wings opened, clutching flowers in both hands. And this is to Annie, the beloved wife of Arthur H. Hockley, 1939, aged 46. And Arthur himself, he followed 20 years later, 1959. Very nicely carved stone. Now we're on the coast here, and here is a very large memorial to a ship that was lost, presumably nearby. If we look at the inscription here, in memory of Pierre Le Savreau, Samuel Crocker, Isaac Clayton, George Hunger, and 25 other shipwrecked sailors who were not identified, whose bodies were washed on shore in 1866, and they were buried in this churchyard. Close beside the path, this is to Rigger MP Tribble, MMR, HMS Victory, 1918. Another with a maritime connection, Charles Wilfrid Ellis, Master Mariner, husband of Bessie, who died in Messina. Presumably refers to Charles. Messina is a city in Italy. 1961, aged 57. And then beneath that, 19 years later, we have Bessie, who died on Christmas Day in 1980. There's an illustration on the stone here of a path, steps leading up into the clouds and to the cross. There's a war grave here, remembered by a personal stone in memory of our dear parents, Mary Tribble, 1965, and Samuel H.L. Tribble, MM, military medal, who was killed in 1917, aged 32. We have a large grave here, close to the church. Obviously very expensive when it was built. And it's the memory of William Vittery Wheaton, a merchant who died at Great Yarmouth in Norfolk, the other side of the country, in January 1821. And on the 31st was buried here. And then his wife Elizabeth, who died a few years later. This is a stone that's lying horizontally, but despite that is still easy to read. Affectionate remembrance of John Upham, 1877, Mary Upham, 1888, Catherine Eupham Upham, and then round down the bottom here, John William Upham. The lettering has been preserved very well on this stone. Up here with the trees and the stones very close together, it's got a very sort of mysterious feel about it, and probably very few people come up into this section of the cemetery. A very clear inscription. This is Mary, the wife of Henry Nicholson, 1844, aged 89 years, and then Mary Louisa Nicholson, 8 months, William Martin Nicholson, 2 years, William Martin Nicholson, 14 months, and Henry Nicholson, 12 years. Child mortality was very high in the Victorian era. That's why they had so many children, because they were quite likely to lose one or two of them. Unfortunately, the Church of St Mary's is locked up, as so many churches are nowadays, so we won't have the chance to view the inside and any memorials it has on the walls. A large stone at the top of one of the slopes, and this one is to Catherine Amanda, the beloved wife of Thomas E.B. Seeley, or Silly. And beneath that we find out that Thomas was 45 years sexton of the parish of Brixham, who fell asleep aged 57 in 1917. And we have other members of the family below that. Up here in this section, what is quite striking is the preponderance of crosses to mark the grave. Presumably when this part of the cemetery was filled, crosses, and more or less a standard size of cross, was de rigueur. When I move round to the face of those memorials, not easy to read, very picturesque with a lichen or lichen on them, but very difficult to get the inscription off there. I think that one is Knowles, surname of Knowles, but it's the same with all of them facing this way. This one at the top here has a large statue of an angel. She's carrying a wreath in one hand. She seems to have a sword or a stick in her left hand, and it's quite a poignant inscription on the base here. Our beloved son, Sidney Hannaford Hellier, Second Lieutenant, 4th East Yorkshire Regiment, who volunteered at the commencement of the Great War. He was wounded at the Battle of Ypres in 28th of April and died at Boulogne, May 1915, aged 25 years. There's a young man that volunteered to fight for our country and gave his life. One here with the traditional broken column, a life cut short. The front face is John C. Southern, 1904, and on the face that is coming this way, Dorothy Loveday Sanders, 1888, aged 91. Difficult to reach that one, but quite an impressive stone. This one has been recently redone. William John Ashe, beloved husband of Harriet A. Ashe. He lost his life through minesweeping, 1916, aged 34. And then she followed in 1953, and a couple of extra names on the bottom there. So that's another one we've seen who gave their life in minesweeping, presumably keeping the English Channel clear. And here's a war memorial to a Canadian, Sapper G.H.M. Baker, Canadian Engineers, 1921. I wonder if anyone ever came to see his grave, his memorial. Well, it's still kept in good condition here. Still looked after, he's still remembered. Nearby is one to someone who fell in the Second World War, Gunner E.T. Weymouth, 1940, aged 28. And the family edition reads, "He never failed to do his best. His heart was true and tender." E.T. Weymouth. One here in the Art Deco style, and the inscription reads, "William Charles Galloway, official of the Malayan government, 1941, aged 49. Very distinctive styling. Always a very poignant part of the graveyard. This is an area where there are children's graves. It's very much in the shade today. We'll try and pick up a couple there. Ava Michelle Marie Scales, 2011. Hannah Katie Silcox, 1994, 9 months and 2 days. Oliver James Lloyd Thompson, our ray of sunshine with a silent smile, 1988, aged 9 months. A group of Second World War graves here, 9 of them in the traditional stone. We just pick out a couple completely at random. This one has flowers on the front of it. Pilot Officer P.K. Horton, pilot in the Royal Air Force, 1942. If I move across to the left, W.I.G. Mitchell, leading aircraftsman, drogue operator, Royal Air Force. And a group of 4 here, seamen. This is C.R. Mason, motor torpedo boat, and the same incident, C.H. Ellison. And then Cavalry, again motor torpedo boat, and on the end D.L. Evans, again MTB. And I notice in front here we have the Canadian maple leaf flag, And alongside them is Geoffrey W. Hill, who died in an air raid on this town, Brixham, in May 1941, aged 14. And then beneath that we've got a couple of other members of the family, possibly not war victims. The one at the bottom says Eric, Royal Engineers, killed and interned at Rennes, 1940. So there's quite a lot of sacrifice in that family. Well, I've walked my way through what appeared to be the main graveyard, and I've come to another section. Now on the left you see they've allowed it to grow wild with the grasses and the wild flowers, and on the right, probably slightly newer graves, they've kept the grass down. A nice compromise. I must admit, I do like the way they've left this to grow wild. It's not impenetrable, there's not brambles and thistles, just a variety of grasses and wildflowers. So you can reach the memorials if you need to. What a lovely spot. Now here's one, very clear inscription. I don't know what the symbol is in the top left-hand corner. Perhaps you could add in the comments if you recognise it. I recognise the surname, Mifsud. There is a very famous photography store in Brixham, and it is run by the Mifsuds. It's a store that I have used myself in the past. So this is Peter John Francis Mifsud, aged 29, died in 1987, husband of Julie and the son of Frank and Sheila. So I imagine connected very much with the photography business in Brixham. Now at the bottom of the slope in this section is a lot of small memorials close together. They're too close for them to actually be burials. So I'm suggesting that this is probably memorials for those that were buried elsewhere or cremated. Rather nicely done though. And maybe pick out one or two for you. Let's have a look at this one over here. It's nice and easy to read. Beryl Isabel Manser, 2018, loving wife, mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. And then Geoffrey Manser in 2020. This could be a good solution for those that want a memorial and with space running out in graveyards, being cremated, and then having a nice memorial stone put up. And you can read so many in such a short time. I can stand here and I can read 20, 30 different stones. Although I do wish people would put something a little bit more interesting than just birth and death dates and dearly beloved. It'd be nice to know what they'd done in life, what career they'd followed, where they'd lived. Just a few extra words or even a picture on the stone. This one stands out because it tells us a story of a young life. Marco, I'll leave you to pronounce the second word, Hunter. Darling boy of Steve and Liz Westcott. Born late in 79, died early in 85. Born at Libreville in Gabon and died in Switzerland. So he was just over 5 years old. And at the top we've got this wonderful picture of a young 5-year-old in his school uniform. This one to Major John Richard Rodley Shaw, TD. If anyone can tell me what TD is, please put it in the comments. Formerly Transjordan Frontier Force and the Palestine Police, 1912-1974. Major John Richard Rodley Shaw. The ground in this section of the cemetery is very poor. You can see the stones are leaning at various angles. But they could have all been solved. I've seen it in other cemeteries where the cemetery owners, the council, lay a long strip of concrete like a path, and then the stones sit squarely and flatly on that concrete base. It's quite straightforward to put a long strip of concrete with a bit of shuttering, and then the stones can rest safely. Michael John Madicott, killed while serving in the RAF, December 53, aged 21. This one to George Pearce, who was lost at sea, 1883, aged 45. His wife, who lived on to 1913, and then Harry, their son, who died in the First War, Libreville, aged 37 years. And for you family history buffs, you'll love this stone. George Tyra, Elizabeth Susan, his wife, and their children, Harriet, George, Samuel Drew, Maria, Ralph, and Sylvia May, the granddaughter. But that's not all. On the rear of the stone are another 12 names, starting with Susanna Tyra, Christopher, Susanna, Moses, Maria, George, Mary Ann, John, Mary E, John and Mary. So there's a family tree to work out. Well, I'm going to leave the graveyard at this point and walk back down to the town. What a lovely spot, and I love the way they've allowed a lot of the graveyard to just be taken over by the wildflowers and the grasses. Really pleasant. Well, that's my visit to the port of Brixham on the south coast of Devon. And I'll leave you with these shots of the picturesque harbour. Till the next time.